Sunday morning, and thanks for joining us for Inside Utah Politics. I'm Glenn Mills. We begin this morning with Representative Jason Chaffetz of Utah's 3rd Congressional District. Representative, great to have you with us.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
For sure. So you've been traveling overseas of late. Tell us a little bit about where you've been and what are some of the top takeaways from
Gosh, we've been to a number of countries, but looking at embassy security, worried about post-Benghazi. Are we properly securing our physical facilities? Also very concerned about what Russia's doing. I think they understand that the United States does not hold the red line, even though they say there's a red line. That the inaction by President Obama in Syria when there was a chemical attack has, I think, emboldened Vladimir Putin. He's been on the march in Crimea. They still occupy a huge swatch of land in Georgia. We went and looked at what's going on in Romania, a good partner of ours, Lithuania. Also visited with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the concern about ISIS and radical Islam. So spent a lot of time overseas, but we spend hundreds of billions of dollars in its national security interests.
You actually had a chance to meet with some of the Syrian refugees as well, didn't you? What did you see there?
We did. We went to Jordan, and it's heart-wrenching. When you go up and you see 85,000 people, and think about it, 85,000 people who are living in this refugee camp and have been there for years. We visited with the family. The father had a good job in Syria, but when the fighting broke out, they escaped down into Jordan, but no prospect of going home. I really think the public policy should be of the United States to help create a safe zone, create a no-fly zone, and then a safe zone so that Syrians can stay in Syria. But right now they've gone and kind of bled their way into Jordan and points beyond, and then headed north up through Turkey and gone up into the European Union, and that's caused all kinds of problems and no hope or end in sight.
Talk more about your discussions with Prime Minister Netanyahu. What are his concerns? What's he seeing from his vantage point?
Well, it's interesting. I went to the BYU Jerusalem Center. I had 10 members of Congress joining me, and I took them to the BYU Jerusalem Center, and I told the Prime Minister how pleased we were that they allow that facility to be there. We talked a lot about ISIS. We talked about Libya, for instance. It's an ungoverned zone. You have parts of Iraq and Syria that are ungoverned as well. That has given rise to these radical terrorists and given them a safe haven, and we've got to tackle that. They're also obviously concerned about their rough neighbors, and we talked a lot about Iran. I think the Iranian deal that the president made was absolutely wrong. It gave billions upon billions of dollars to the Iranians. They are the #1 state sponsor of terrorists, and it's usually Israel and the United States that are the major targets. So
Netanyahu also expressed concern about that at the time it was happening.
Yeah.
Is he reversed course at all, or is he still
He's more fired up and passionate. I mean, we were sitting for an hour this close as you and I are, and you look him in the eye, and he's telling you about the threat that it poses not only to Israel, but also to the world and to the United States. We have empowered and given money, assets, and resources to the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And I don't think it's going to prevent Iran long-term from obtaining a nuclear weapon that they would gladly use against nations like the United States. I think this will be the worst part of the Obama legacy. I think it'll be the #1 thing that he's remembered for is the fact that he helped empower Iran in giving them a nuclear bomb.
I want to move on to some of your work as chairman of the Oversight Committee. You've had Hillary Clinton in, you've had Director Comey talk about the email scandal and new developments coming out this week. We learned that the FBI uncovered about 15,000 additional emails that were not turned over. What are your thoughts on the latest developments?
Well, Hillary Clinton created this problem for herself. She created this homebrew computer, and when she created public records, those are records of the United States of America. You don't just get to keep those and hold them for years and then come up with this sorting system with herself. That's what she did. We're just trying to get to the truth. It's one of the largest breaches of national security information ever in the history of the State Department. We got to figure out how that happened and make sure that it never ever happens again. But she needs to come clean. Hillary Clinton needs to come clean. She hasn't done a press conference in like 265 days. She needs to answer these questions. Everything she said about this publicly, under oath and in the public, is pretty much been false. It's been a lie, and I think she needs to answer it.
What are your thoughts on the FBI and the Attorney General both coming to the conclusion prior to this that charges should not be filed.
I come to a different conclusion. They say there isn't enough intent that they could find to give these materials to another nation state or somebody of nefarious intent, but that's not what the statute says. The statute says you're just going to house these in a non-secure format. So this data, this classified data that was on her computer that she was doing back and forth is of such high level of classification that even I, as the chairman of the Oversight Committee, even I can't see it. And so we got to sort this out. She created quite a mess that we're going to be dealing with and trying to unravel for who knows how long.
Do you believe she lied to Congress?
I do believe it. And what I'm disappointed in is that the FBI director, after a year of investigation, he testified that they never looked at her testimony before Congress. She, as a politician, may have just lied, out on the street or talking to somebody or on camera. But when you come to Congress and raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that's what you have to do. And if you don't, it's against the law. And they never even looked at that at the FBI.
Talk a little bit about Director Comey. Do you trust him? Do you believe he's an honorable person and really going about this the way he should be?
I think he is an honorable person. I don't think he has a political agenda in this. But I also believe him when he says over the course of 4 hours how sloppy, cavalier, and how she was not sophisticated, how what a mess that this created, how concerned he is. And he also refuted pretty much every talking point that she's had about these emails. So you come to the conclusion that, well, what's the consequence? How come there's no consequence? How come nobody's held accountable? And that's where I think Lady Justice, seems to have that blindfold kind of peeking through it when it comes to the name Clinton, because anybody else who had done what she did, I think would probably be in jail.
You came under a little scrutiny yourself for using a personal Gmail account. What's your response to that?
Oh, hogwash. I'm required by law to do so. I have an official House account, and that's where I do the congressional business, but I also have a private account. So if you're doing political work, you have to use that. So of course I have a business card that has that on there. So I think that was shown to be absolutely, totally false. And also,
and in using those two, you've stuck to the standards by which both of them are supposed to operate?
Yeah, there are rules that govern how you do the Federal Records Act, which applies to members of the executive branch. It don't apply to the judiciary branch, nor do they apply to the legislative branch.
Here in the state of Utah, some local jails are releasing illegal immigrants to make way for citizens who need to be incarcerated.
Yeah.
You had a very interesting discussion earlier in this year with the Department of Homeland Security about illegal immigrants who are committing crime and being released back on the streets. Paint the picture for us. How big of a problem in our country?
This is a stunning statistic. People that are here illegally get caught committing a crime, get convicted of that crime, serve time for that crime, or get punished for that crime 66,000 times. This administration, rather than deporting those people, they released them back into the public. They committed murders, they committed DUIs, they committed sexual assaults. These are all people that should have, A, never been in our country in the first place, but number two, this is the criminal element. This is not some sweet, woman who's trying to help her son. This is somebody who's committing crimes, being caught and convicted, and instead of being deported, they just get released back into Utah and other places.
How is that happening, and what have you learned since that hearing?
What's stunning is some people say, well, they might not have had the funding. The Department of Homeland Security tried to give back more than $100 million that we had appropriated to deport these people. Then the State Department said, well, and Homeland Security said, well, these other countries won't necessarily take them back. If they won't take them back, then stop giving those countries visa. That's what the law says. So in the case of Haiti, where there was this horrific murder in Connecticut, they should have deported this person. But Haiti said, we're not going to take him back. So he was allowed to stay in the United States, and he committed another murder. And that's, I don't know how you look any parent in the eye or any person in the eye and say that's in the best interest of the United States. Don't give Haiti any more visas if they're not going to take back their criminals that have come here illegally.
So moving forward then, what's being done? What are the solutions here?
Well, trying to shine as bright a light as we can.
You think it's going under the radar?
I do. I think it gets lost. I mean, 66,000 people. Take BYU Stadium, take the Rice-Eccles Stadium. That many people, the criminal element, they just released them back out on the streets instead of deporting them. I'm trying to draw as much attention to it I can because it's a lack of political will. It's not a lack of funding. It's not